Next up, we have Pieter deVos, Community Development Practitioner and PhD student in Anthropology, presenting on visual storytelling for social change.
Okay. In the spring of 1996, I ventured into Edmonton's inner city. I had emerged from the protected world of university disorientated and unsettled. The middle-class dream of chasing white picket fences didn't make sense to me, and I knew I had to get off the beaten path to find my way. So I decided to channel my unrest into a constructive outlet, namely a photographic exploration of poverty in Edmonton's inner city. At the time, homelessness was becoming a visible reality on Edmonton's streets, and I wanted to tell the story of what was happening. As a youth, I fell in love with the work of social documentary photographers such as Eugene Richards and Mary Ellen Mark, who went to the edges of society to humanize issues that are often obscured by stereotypes and statistics. I knew I had a photographic eye, the ability to recognize compelling images, but I wasn't sure at the time if I could engage in the type of intimate encounters required to tell provocative stories. A photo essay on poverty led to over a decade of exploring life at the edges of my own backyard and abroad, exploring topics ranging from homelessness to health issues on First Nation reserves. In 2006, I initiated a photographic exploration of HIV in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and Vancouver, BC. The project produced a compelling account of the community response to HIV in one of the richest cities in the world and in one of the poorest. It challenged viewers to look past the knee-jerk assumptions of us and them. Although the project was successful, it left me with a nagging question of what gave me the right to represent other people's realities. And so, for the past several years, I facilitated projects here and overseas where communities have been able to tell their own stories. In 2010, I went back to Haiti 6 months after the earthquake to work with local photojournalists to document the reconstruction efforts. As you can imagine, the country was devastated and people were still dealing with the after effects of extreme losses and trauma. Part of my time in the country was spent working with youth to teach them basic photographic techniques. This project, as well as others that I've facilitated, were based on the following principles. The first is that images can teach, that communities should be able to represent their own concerns and interests, that the very act of taking pictures can be empowering because it involves a process of choosing what to include in the frame and what to leave out. So the very exercise of pressing the button is a choice. The last principle is that the process of telling stories about photos moves the conversation away from individual experiences to shared realities. The photos that are scrolling behind me are examples of photos taken by youth, most of whom had no prior experience with photography. Photography allows individuals to pursue creative forms of self-expression, to capture emotion, to explore symbolism, to challenge the taken-for-granted parts of community life. Photography allows people to see their worlds again with a fresh set of eyes, to ask the questions about what are they witnessing, to identify what is happening, and to talk about what can be done about it. In a way, photography incorporates a broad range of elements beyond pressing the shutter. It involves learning to express opinions, to interpret and discuss images, to listen to others, to develop ideas and a voice, to an identified audience, and define messages. All of these elements are equally important part of the process and the route to self-expression and advocacy. But photos are not the only visual tools that allow people to engage in thinking about their worlds. Art can also be a powerful means of critical reflection. In Pakistan, I worked with a group of women from one of the poorest and most densely populated cities in Karachi, the town of Liari. Behind me is an aerial view of the neighborhood depicting the strengths and barriers impacting the lives of women. The map shows some of the factors shaping the community, the negatives of the drug war, inadequate sanitation, political conflicts, gender inequality. It also shows some of the positives, the gathering places for women, the schools and healthcare. In Karachi, art created a space for 8 women to talk about their lives and their shared dreams. Collages and drawings became the focal points for conversations, and the process as a whole became a passport for me to visit a world that outsiders, especially foreign men, rarely gain entry into. Over the course of the week, I had the privilege of listening to these women share their stories of mutual struggles and of their hopes of improving the lives of women in their community. The drawings behind me depict some of their suggested strategies for addressing the challenges facing women. The tree represents the transformative potential of enhancing the literacy and vocational skills of women in the community. Each branch represents a key change. Something powerful happens when we tell stories. The photo behind me shows a youth from the Ochis First Nation sharing the key events from his life, the turning points and transitions. His story becomes the entry point for other individuals to identify common experiences and to talk about the larger forces that are shaping the lives of Aboriginal youth. There is a saying that all private struggles are connected to public issues. Art and photography are ways of naming these struggles and bringing them into the public arena. Of speaking, for example, about the impacts of HIV on Aboriginal youth in Vancouver, of talking about the most private perspectives and our most intimate relationships. By doing so, visual storytelling cuts through the isolation and allows us to imagine new ways of working together. This summer, hopefully, I will have a chance to work in a squatter camp in South Africa where photography and narrative processes will be used again to further explore how people in their own community experience their worlds.